On this episode of Mythbusters,
All right, we are ready to board.
it's all aboard for an aviation revolution.
Whoa! In an orderly fashion.
Adam and Jamie turn air travel upside down
Apparently, it saves time.
when they ask, is the standard back-to-front boarding system really the slowest? Buckle up, because it's going to get bumpy.
Turbulence! Whoa!
First up, Adam and Jamie are tackling the nation's vexation with aviation.
Pop quiz, Jamie. How do you board an airplane?
I walk.
No, not so specific. How do you and the other passengers get on an airplane?
We walk.
This is not a trick question. Just how do people board an airplane?
In zones?
Exactly. In zones specifically from back to front. And there's a myth going around that the standard way almost all airlines use to board their planes from back to front is in fact the slowest and least efficient way to get people onto an airplane.
Well, that sounds like something we need to investigate.
It's exactly what I was thinking.
In the U.S. in 2011, over 700 million passengers checked in, sat down, buckled up, and took off. Their number one complaint? The waiting around. But Adam and Jamie want to know if the standard method of boarding is to blame. Have the airlines got it back to front with back-to-front boarding? Is it really the worst way of getting up, and away?
Well, it looks like we need a plane and a couple of hundred volunteer passengers.
And we need a bunch of boarding methods.
Well, I can think of at least 3 or 4 off the top of my head.
All right. Sounds like we should run some volunteers through their paces, see which one is the most efficient.
Let's buckle down and do it.
So to test the best boarding methods, Adam and Jamie require a plane. But their reputation
You know, it's fun to see things blow up sometimes.
for misuse and abuse of aircraft has preceded them.
Cutting up a plane.
And that means they have to make their own.
We've got to build a plane.
Oh boy.
Luckily for the prospective volunteer passengers, their DIY plane won't really be leaving the ground.
We just need something that is actually as minimal as possible.
The goal is to construct a 173-seat airplane interior that matches the one most used by commercial airlines, so that they can accurately replicate a full-scale boarding scenario.
We want to be able to see it from all the way around so we can observe from outside what's going on clearly.
And an hour later, with their brainstorm weathered and construction problems solved,
This is going to be cool.
You bet.
it's off to a spectacular location to bring their vision to life.
Looks like an airplane to me.
I love this location. Let's get started.
Okay.
So we've come to the Mare Island Naval Base, about an hour from the Mythbuster shop. Right there's pretty good. This building I'm standing in used to be a storage facility for outfitting boats, and it's over 100 years old. But for us, today, it is our mocked-up airplane hangar.
The first part of the plan to be put into place is a base to build on.
It's gonna be a nice set.
Yep.
Once their plywood platform is given a coat of paint or two, it's ready for the all-important structural components. And a well-oiled Mythbusters machine
Good? Okay.
means the metal skeletal components are raised well before the tray tables are even stowed. With the steel superstructure solid, up goes the first of the recycled overhead luggage bins.
There we go.
With a burst of fast forward, up goes the last.
Beautiful. Let's put in the chairs.
The seating, also recycled from a real plane by Interface Aviation, is brought in and secured, replicating the layout of an average mid-sized airliner.
There we go.
First class is in.
Next, up goes the departure lounge, with a curtained-off gangway and even a fake ticket scanner.
It doesn't beep, but I can go like this. Boop. Thank you. Boop. Thank you. Boop. Thank you.
Which means Mythbust Air is ready for its maiden flight. That won't leave the ground. It's a frustrating constant of commercial airline travel. Boarding the plane always seems to take longer than it should. But is it down to the back-to-front boarding system? To find out, Captain Savage and co-pilot Heinemann have replicated a commercial boarding scenario with a team of real flight attendants.
Here's how this is going to go down. Every single one of our Mythbust Air test passengers will be issued a ticket, just like this one, with a specific seat assignment, and they will board the plane through our gate right here.
Boop. As they come aboard, our cabin manager, Sylvia, will check them in and send them on their way to the correct seat.
The rest of our cabin crew will be stationed just as they would be on a real airplane, assisting the passengers in stowing their luggage.
When the luggage is stowed and everybody's properly seated, the flight attendants will call time and the boarding is complete.
We'll be assessing each of our boarding techniques on two main metrics. The first one being how the boarding method felt to the passengers. So as our test subjects deplane from each test, we will ask them to vote here on how the test felt to them, whether they thought it was great, just okay, or in fact, terrible.
And the second part of the monitoring will be done by me up here with this timer, and that'll determine how long the test took.
What about people who gum up the works, you ask? I'm glad you mentioned that. In about 5% of our ticket envelopes, and consistent across all of our tests, we've included instructions for some of our test subjects to behave just like those passengers who do slow boarding down. The personality types we've identified are parents with tiny children, people who go to the bathroom during boarding and have to swim upstream to get back to their seat, people who sit in the wrong seat, and people with suit coats who meticulously fold them in the aisle before putting them on their luggage.
It's a comprehensive set of test parameters. The wild cards, accurate boarding scenario, and experienced cabin crew will provide the realism, and the time and customer satisfaction scores will give each of the boarding methods a comparative and quantitative score. Nearly 200 volunteers with their carry-on baggage have generously given up their day to queue for science. And their first test is the control, supposedly the slowest of all systems.
This test is the one that people are most familiar with. It's called the back to front method. Check out this graphic. Using assigned seats, once they've loaded business class, then they load the back third, the middle third, and the front third.
All right, Jamie, start. Welcome to Mythbust Air, flight 3.14152927. We are ready to begin pre-boarding. Parents with children and business class passengers may now board the airplane. Step up to the gate and hand over your ticket.
With the clock ticking, the boarding commences.
This is awesome.
And it really couldn't be better.
If you are seated in rows 20 through 30, you may now board the plane. Rows 20 through 30, board the plane.
Welcome.
The advantages of the replica setup soon become clear. The open-sided structure allows full access to the cameras, and we can really see how the boarding is progressing.
All right, we are now ready to board rows 10 through 19. If you are in row 10 through 19, you may now start to board the airplane.
Once the plane is almost full, familiar pre-flight patterns emerge.
Hello, 2019.
There's a backlog of passengers on the gangway. Passengers in aisle seats having to get up to allow access to the middle and window seats. And inevitably, there is plenty of carry-on luggage too large to fit in the overhead compartments.
We're gate checking bags. That's awesome.
There's no space.
Okay, what's your final destination?
Springfield.
Okay, I'll get that tag for
Okay,
you.
thanks.
It's not just excess baggage delaying departure. The wild cards also gum up the works in a realistic way. But eventually, everyone is seated and the plane is ready for wheels up.
Stop, Jamie.
But what's the damage?
From the time that boarding was announced to the time that the last bin was closed, for back to front boarding, it was 24 minutes and 29 seconds. Now that's a fairly common method of boarding, and that'll form our baseline for the other tests.
The time is, of course, crucial for that comparison, but so is customer satisfaction.
Let's see what we got.
All right.
Each positive experience is scored +1. A terrible vote is -1. And each neutral, okay, is 0, which, for back to front, gives a final tally of +19. But the score and time don't mean anything on their own. Comparisons are required. So to find out if the myth will soar or crash land, Captain Savage will need to log a few more bumpy flights. Hassle-free air travel may be pie in the sky,
Welcome to Mythbust Air, flight 3.1415927.
But Adam and Jamie are determined to find out if the standard back-to-front boarding system
Stop, Jamie.
is the slowest and most unsatisfactory option available. Adam and Jamie already have a back-to-front baseline, but there's a whole barrage of boarding baloney still to come. And next up
Families with small children in business class may board the plane now.
is the perfect method to contrast with the control.
Test number 2.
And that's no system at all.
We are going to board all rows, all seats. All rows, all seats may now board the plane. Over there.
Each passenger has an assigned seat, and there are the usual wild cards like jacket folders. But other than that, it's simply first come, first boarded. And the passengers found their assigned seats in a surprisingly short amount of time.
So this test was random once first class and parents with small children had boarded, and it came in at 17 minutes, which is pretty quick.
You guys may now deplane.
That's an astonishing 8 minutes faster than the control. But remember, time isn't the only factor. Each passenger gets to vote on the overall experience. The random boarding clearly polarized opinion. But despite the significantly faster time, when the votes are tallied, it turns out it was less popular than the control.
This is a stunning result. Random boarding with allocated seats was far quicker and yet a much less positive experience for the passengers. This tells me that there is definitely something to this myth. If random is so much quicker, then back to front is clearly flawed in terms of speed and efficiency. But whether there's a better method that yields a more positive passenger result, I think requires more testing. Shall we?
Next up is what we call the Wilma technique. It stands for windows, middle, and aisle. Once you've boarded business class, then you load those with window seats, then the middle seats, and then the aisle. Seems pretty logical to me.
Okay, we are now going to board people seated at window seats. If your ticket has a letter A or a letter F on it, you may board. All rows with letters A or F. I was a little nervous about how that was going to work out, but it seems like everyone's getting it pretty clearly.
Yep, as it turns out, with some clear instructions, it's quite simple.
We are now going to board middle seats. If your seat number has a letter B or E attached to it, you may now board the plane.
And the result is an even quicker time.
What was the time on that one, Jamie?
14 minutes, 55 seconds.
Nice.
The faster, smoother system is also reflected in the satisfaction score, a fulfilling 102. And that has Jamie convinced of the result.
Wilma is significantly faster and 5 times better in terms of customer satisfaction than the control. For me, that means the myth is confirmed right here. The method in use by the vast majority of airlines is simply not the best available. What we have to determine now is what is exactly the best method.
Well, the straight windows middle aisle or Wilma boarding worked pretty fast, but there's apparently a Wilma method that's even more sophisticated. It breaks it out into windows middle aisle in separate blocks, and it is going to tax all my faculties of being a clear announcer of who gets seated when. They're going to be seated in 10 separate blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Makes me tired just looking at it. All right, Jamie, you can start the timer.
Once again, Adam ushers on business class and families, and then it gets complicated.
The first group to board, rows 22 through 30, but only the window seats. Seats A or F may now board the plane.
Despite the complexity, Adam rises to the occasion.
I feel that this loudspeaker makes me virile and more powerful.
And it all goes swimmingly. And with another fast time under their seatbelts,
That's time.
this myth is really taking off.
I fly a heck of a lot, and I'm pretty sure that every plane I've ever gotten on has boarded the passengers in the back-to-front zone system. And we're not done testing, but we've already determined that the back-to-front zone system is pretty terrible compared to almost everything else.
For this test, we've set everything up exactly like it would be on a real airplane, from the dimensions of the plane to using real seats. And given the fact that stowing luggage and hand luggage is a very time-consuming part of that process, we're using genuine overhead bins.
We strive for accuracy in all of our tests. That's why in setting this up,
I'm ready to come out now.
With the help of an excited plane load of volunteers,
Oh, we had a little turbulence. Woo!
Adam and Jamie are asking if airlines around the world have got it wrong. And next up is an experiment in anarchy. After business class, it's every passenger for themselves.
Now, all the rest of you, there are no assigned seats and no assigned rows. So when I say, which is now, you can all board the airplane. Whoa! In an orderly fashion. Wow.
In the earlier random test, there were assigned seats. But this is just a free-for-all.
This is interesting. There's no assigned seating, no order at all. And so what they're doing is actually the opposite of the back to front. They're filling up the front first and then going backwards, which doesn't seem like it would be the most efficient way of doing it because they're blocking the aisle right in the beginning of the plane.
But somewhat counterintuitively, the lack of seat assignments leads to the fastest time so far. It saves on time, but according to a customer survey score of -5, not on stress.
This is fascinating. I've just finished scoring the random boarding method, and they hated this method. Overwhelmingly, they voted it as terrible. And I think this is an interesting window into human psychology. I think humans like structure. We want to know that there's a structure, even if it takes us longer. It appeals to our sense of justice that things are happening for a reason. It's fascinating.
Which leaves the results looking like this. Despite surveys indicating that waiting and queuing is the single biggest complaint for frequent flyers, it seems a sense of order and structure is just as important. Which leaves one final attempt by the team to find the perfect boarding solution. One that might provide speed, structure, and satisfaction.
Next up is a method called the reverse pyramid. It's pretty complex. In fact, the passengers are told merely to board by zones, which are pre-sorted on their tickets. The best way to explain it to you guys is with the editor's help. Editors, if you'd put up a graphic, please, and show the zones as they board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's pretty complicated. It's supposed to be pretty fast. We're going to find out.
It appears complicated, but with zones and seat numbers printed on the tickets, it's actually incredibly simple.
If you have group 2 on your ticket, you may board the airplane.
This one appears to be working kind of like the Wilma techniques where it's filling on the outside and then gradually works its way towards the middle.
Group 3 may now board the airplane.
But the pyramid strategy ends up doing that in blocks, which may or may not help it.
And when the timer stops at 15:10, it's back to the shop on an imaginary flight to make their final assessment.
Buckle in.
Okay.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, shoot.
So where do we stand?
Well, the myth was that the most common technique that airlines use for boarding a plane, that is from back to front, also happened to be the slowest and least efficient method of putting people onto an airplane. And based on our testing, I have to say it's myth confirmed.
Indeed. But you know what's interesting is that the fastest technique we tried was also the least popular.
That might be why most airlines don't use it.
Well, the good news is that the 3 most popular techniques we tried are significantly faster than the back-to-front technique. So those are the ones we should be using.
Absolutely. You hear that, airlines?